Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning has been on the memory of George Marshall Clark. Historically, he's known as Milwaukee's only victim of a lynching that happened on September 8th, 1861. On September 8th of 2021, a gravestone was placed on the unmarked grave of Mr. Clark, thanks to my next guest, Tyrone Macklee Randle Jr. He's a Milwaukee-based artist and community activist who focuses on issues dealing with racial identity and human behavior, and Sara Tomilin, who's the Assistant Executive Director at Forest Home Cemetery in Milwaukee. How are you?
We're good. Thank you for
Yeah,
inviting us.
pretty good.
Thank you both for joining me today. And like many people, I find the story of George Marshall Clark an important story that needed to be told, and one that I had never heard of. So Tyrone, if you would explain how you first became aware of this historic event and what inspired you to really change the ending to the story.
Okay. I first found out about Marshall Clark, I want to say the year 2015. I was doing my senior thesis around work that was like Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin sort of based work about just racially based killings. And my instructors told me I didn't have enough information on the subject matter to continue with that. Um, so I took an independent study, and I learned about Marshall Clark through that independent study and research. Fast forward to 2020, there's the George Floyd protests, and I ended up getting hit by a car after local police, MPD, pretty much, they tried to detain me, and I ended up on the ground. I ended up, being injured, and not being able to march and to do my part while in the hospital. I felt guilty. Um, so I decided to organize a march around Marshall. Because I knew a lot of people didn't know about that story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we got here.
Yeah, that's how we got here. And so, with you being a victim of police brutality, as you describe yourself, you felt like you could relate to what he probably went through during that time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just with the story of Marshall, there only being so few officers working at the time. It's just talking with other people, and a lot of people don't want to say it out loud, but they believe that some of the cops at least had something to do with what happened.
Mm.
Um, so we fast forward to today, and it's the same stuff's happening over and over again. It's just the difference is it's a gun now. It's not a noose. Um,
Wow. It's all very moving, very emotional. And Sara, it's interesting in the sense that Milwaukee was founded in 1846, and then the first burial actually took place there at Forest Home in 1850. So you've been around, you as in the Forest Home Cemetery, been around for really the entire history of this city. So it's an official Milwaukee landmark that is the burial site of many of the names that we see on Milwaukee streets and parks and all of those things. So if you would tell us a little bit more about the cemetery and the history that lies there.
Yeah, I mean, we're known for our beer barons and industrialists who are buried here. That's what most people associate Forest Home with. But this is a wonderful story because it's really about other people that people maybe have forgotten about, that were part of the fabric. When George Marshall Clark was buried, we were only 11 years old, and the city was only 4 years old when the cemetery began. And really, we are the fabric of the original people who were part of the city. We grew as the city expanded, and we were there for all citizens and welcomed people from all walks of life. So we do have a lot of unmarked graves here just because of the age of the cemetery. But this was one that we didn't know about. We have great records. We did know it was George Marshall Clark. In fact, we have a handwritten interment book that shows where his birth date place was, his birth date, his death date, and then also the cause of death they recorded at that time. And it does say murdered on it, and it's
Wow.
handwritten. So we knew about him after Tyrone showed up and asked about him, but then Tyrone came back and said, hey, there's no marker, and he couldn't find the gravesite. And that's when we talked, and we actually are a nonprofit, and we do work where we raise money for markers. And I said, hey, let's do this together, and let's get this one marked. And the big reason for us is we really want to highlight things that are historically significant here and share it with other people. And so now we have a marker, and people can come and take a tour of the cemetery, and he will be included on the tour, and he's also in our tour guide from now going forward. So that story is going to be told again and again.
Yeah, and so it's intriguing for me when you think about the fact that there are 26 Milwaukee mayors, 5 Wisconsin governors, like you said, beer barons, a company of generals. There's even an early African American leader by the name of Ezekiel Gillespie. There was the state's first female doctor, so many outstanding people who are there at Forest Home, but yet there was this unmarked grave of a man with a story that really does resonate with a lot of people. So now that you have come together and you were able to mark that grave on September 8th of 2021, I'd like to hear from each of you. What was the emotion that you felt? Because I don't know if you realize how big of a deal it is, how you've actually changed the course of history, I believe.
Go ahead, Tyrone.
I always get emotional when I get asked this, because it's just I am so glad that this has come to a close for Marshall. Like, but at the same time, the fabric of the city is still the same because of how long it's been. And so, it's a bittersweet thing for me. It's a bittersweet thing, because it's like, yes, it's being acknowledged now. Now we can heal. Now there's a, time for us to reroute. We can start and use this as a way to change the narrative that this stuff only existed in the South, and start to address the issues that are here. But at the same time, it's like we still have all of this work to do. So now there's the idea of having to go back and play and to come to a resolution for us as a city. And for me, I think in continuing, honoring Marshall's legacy is to teach this in schools. Is to teach this in NPS, in other Midwestern states, because this is not just a Southern issue. It never has been. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sarah, what about you?
Well, it's an uncomfortable story, but it needed to be told and not forgotten. And that's sometimes how things are, but we needed to have him rest in peace and remember him. That's what the cemetery does. And Tyrone and the donors that donated to this really helped make that happen.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, how long did it take once the two of you came together, started a GoFundMe, and really made people aware of what you were trying to do? What was the time frame of getting this gravestone put down?
I think, what was it? We started late fall.
Yeah.
And then I think by March we had the grave marker ordered.
Wow.
Happened a lot faster than we thought it would.
By February, we had all of the fundraising sewn up. So it went really well. There's so many people that just were really moved by the fact that this had happened and didn't know about it, because you'd think it'd be something that would be people would know about it. And we were bringing it to light, but also we were recognizing his life, which is what should be done.
And I do have to say, shout out to the People's Revolution. Like, they are, in terms of my work in the beginning of it, they're the feet on the ground that made the noise about it. And they were in the streets screaming, like, this has to be acknowledged. This guy doesn't have a headstone. We need to get this guy a headstone. And through that, we got a lot of the emails and stuff through the GoFundMe, just from people seeing it outside.
I did notice at the ceremony there were a lot of dignitaries from Milwaukee and surrounding areas that felt the need to be there to honor him and his memory. And so when you know that that in fact has taken place, it gives the true meaning to what it means to rest in peace or rest in power. So now that that gravestone is down, what are your hopes moving forward?
I think this is a continuation work. This is a continuous learning journey. Um, so my hopes is that people are continuing the education. Um, there are other people out there. We actually found another person, Martin Smith, but I'm not going to get too much into who he is. But he's another, Black, I would say a hero. He's not, I would say the same in terms of his life trajectory as Marshall. He was a Black hero. He actually was doing stuff, and Black kids need heroes. Our Black kids need heroes. So the continuation work, we need to uncover a lot of history here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you both for taking the time out to talk to us today, and thank you for the work that you've done. Tyrone Macklee Randle Jr., he's a local artist and community activist, and Sara Tomilin, she is the Assistant Executive Director at Forest Home Cemetery. That is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues in Milwaukee. Have a great day.